They thought they were targeting just another quiet truck stop along Interstate 40. They saw an aging Marine veteran sitting alone at the counter, a few scattered truckers minding their own business, and figured it would be an easy mark to expand their criminal empire. What the Road Wolves MC didn't realize was that Marcus Davidson wasn't just any former Marine. He was Force Recon with extensive experience in counter-narcotics operations. His quiet demeanor masked a strategic mind that had dismantled drug cartel across 3 continents. Now, watching 2 Road Wolves members swagger through the door of Crossroads truck stop, Marcus recognized the telltale signs of a gang marking new territory. He could have walked away, could have minded his own business like everyone else who'd watched this gang terrorize truck stops across 5 states. Instead, he chose to make a stand, a decision that would transform a simple truck stop into the front line of a war against one of the region's most notorious criminal organizations. By the time the dust settled, the Road Wolves would learn a hard lesson about judging a book by its cover, and the trucking community would never be the same. This is the story of how 2 bikers picked the wrong veteran to intimidate, and how one man's courage inspired an entire community to take back their roads. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The evening sun cast long shadows across the Crossroads truck stop parking lot, the neon open sign flickering to life as dusk settled in. Marcus Davidson sat at his usual spot at the counter, methodically reviewing his route maps while drinking his 3rd cup of coffee. 20 years of military service had ingrained in him a habit of positioning himself where he could see both entrances while keeping his back to the wall. Jenny Thompson approached with a fresh pot of coffee, her cheerful demeanor a constant source of warmth in the diner. Need a refill? Marcus, thanks. Jenny always tastes better when you make it, she smiled, filling his cup. You say that every time, and I mean it every time. The peaceful evening routine shattered as 2 motorcycles roared into the parking lot, their straight pipes deliberately loud enough to set everyone's teeth on edge. Marcus didn't look up from his maps, but his awareness shifted instantly through the reflection in the chrome coffee machine. He watched 2 men dismount their bikes, both wearing leather vests adorned with the distinctive Road Wolves MC patches. Jenny's hand trembled slightly as she sat down the coffee pot. Oh no, she whispered, those are the ones Beth warned us about. Marcus gave her a reassuring nod. It's okay, Jenny, just go about your business like normal. The door chimed as the bikers entered. The taller one, sporting a graying beard and in cold eyes, swaggered in first. A patch on his vest identified him as Hammer. His companion, younger and wiry with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck, followed close behind. Well, ain't this cozy, Hammer drawled, his voice carrying an edge of mockery. Real nice setup you got here. Beth Morrison, the truck stop's owner, emerged from the kitchen. Her face remained neutral, but Marcus noticed her right hand sliding beneath the counter, where he knew she kept a baseball bat. Welcome to Crossroads. What can I get you? Gentleman Snake smirked, leaning against the counter. How about everything in the register for starters? The few other customers in the diner, a couple of truckers and a family of 3, tensed visibly. The father instinctively moved to shield his wife, and young daughter Hammer chuckled, placing a hand on Snake's shoulder. Easy. Their brother were just here to talk business. He turned to Beth. See this stretch of highways under new management? Road Wolves are expanding our territory, and we're here to discuss your monthly protection fees. Marcus continued studying his maps, but his muscles coiled, imperceptibly ready for action. He'd seen this pattern before, both in the Marines and after. Small gangs moving into new territory always started with intimidation, establishing fear before revealing their true operations. Beth's voice remained steady. This is a family establishment. We don't need any protection. Everyone needs protection, Hammer replied, his tone darkening. Bad things happen to businesses that don't understand that equipment breaks down, supplies go missing, customers have accidents. Snake wandered toward the family's table, deliberately bumping their daughter's chair. The little girl whimpered, clutching her mother's arm. That's when Marcus spoke, his voice Calm but carrying the weight of command, the lady said she's not interested. The diner fell silent. Hammer turned slowly, seeming to notice Marcus. For the first time, well, looks like we got ourselves a hero. He approached the counter, looming over Marcus. This ain't your business, old-timer. Marcus finally looked up from his maps, meeting Hammer gaze. His eyes were steady, showing neither fear nor aggression. You're making it my business. That right? Hammer leaned closer. And just who do you think you are? Just a guy trying to enjoy his coffee. Marcus's voice remained level. But I've got a pretty good idea who you are. Road Wolves MC, moving up from Texas, trying to establish new territory. You start with intimidation at truck stops and diners, then move on to protection rackets, then drugs. Hammer's eyes narrowed. You seem to know a lot about it. I know enough to tell you you're making a mistake. Snake moved toward Marcus, his hand drifting toward his belt. Only mistake being made is by you, old man. Marcus didn't move, didn't even tense up. He simply took another sip of his coffee. Two choices, gentlemen. You can walk out that door, get on your bikes, and find somewhere else to cause trouble, or you can try whatever you're thinking about trying, and we'll see how that works out for everyone. Something in Marcus's tone, the absolute certainty in his voice, made Snake hesitate. Hammer studied Marcus more carefully now, noting the military precision of his posture, the deliberate way he controlled his space. You're the one making a mistake, Hammer said, though his voice carried a hint of uncertainty. This ain't over. Marcus nodded slightly. It is for tonight. Hammer backed away slowly, maintaining eye contact. Come on, Snake, we'll finish this conversation another time. The bikers retreated, their attempts at intimidation falling flat in the face of Marcus's calm resistance. As they mounted their bikes, Hammer pointed two fingers at his eyes, then at the diner, a clear signal that they'd be watching. Once the roar of motorcycles faded, the tension in the diner broke. The father at the family's table approached Marcus. Thank you, sir. I don't know what would have happened if Marcus cut him off gently. Nothing was going to happen to your family, not here. He turned to Beth. But you might want to call Sheriff Cooper. Let him know the Road Wolves are moving into his territory. Beth nodded, already reaching for the phone. They'll be back, won't they? Yes, Marcus said, returning to his maps. With more of them next time, but we'll be ready. Brought him a fresh cup of coffee, her hands still shaking slightly. What are we going to do? Marcus looked up at her, his expression softening. We're going to show them that they picked the wrong truck, stopped the wrong community, and definitely the wrong veteran to mess with. As the night settled in, Marcus remained at his spot at the counter, planning his next moves. He knew the Road Wolves would return probably the next night with reinforcements. They couldn't afford to let his challenge go unanswered. It would undermine their attempts to establish territory, but that's exactly what he was counting on. Sometimes the best way to stop a threat wasn't to run from it or to fight it head on, but to draw it out into the open where it could be dealt with properly. He pulled out his phone and began making calls to other drivers he knew, veterans like himself who understood the importance of standing together. By the time the Road Wolves returned, they'd find out that Crossroads wasn't just another truck stop. It was a line in the sand that Marcus Davidson and his community weren't going to let them cross. Dawn broke over Crossroads truck stop, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Marcus had spent the night making calls, reaching out to his network of veteran truckers. Now sitting at his usual spot at the counter, he watched as familiar faces began filtering in. Beth worked the morning shift herself, pouring coffee for the growing crowd of truckers. Never seen it this busy this early, Jenny remarked, tying her apron as she started her shift. Marcus nodded, scanning the room. Big Steve Johnson, a former Army Ranger turned trucker, sat nearby nursing his coffee 3 tables over. Mike Doc Wilson, who'd served as a combat medic, was deep in conversation with 2 other drivers. None of them were here by accident. Friends of yours? Beth asked quietly as she refilled Marcus's cup. Let's just say we share some common interests, Marcus replied, particularly in keeping places like this safe. The bell above the door chimed as Sheriff Tom Cooper walked in. He was still in his early 40s, but the job had added years to his face. He made his way directly to Marcus, settling onto the adjacent stool. Heard we had some unwelcome visitors last night, Tom said. Accepting the coffee Beth offered, Marcus turned slightly. Road Wolves, 2 of them for now. But there'll be more, yeah. I know about them. They've been moving up from Texas, taking over truck stops, using them as distribution points for their drug operation. Had 3 stops shut down in the last month alone due to drug activity. Figured as much. Their patch design includes some cartel symbols I recognize from my time in Force Recon. They're not just small-time criminals. Tom's eyebrows raised slightly. Force Recon, all this time I thought you were just another trucker. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Still am, but before that I spent some time with Joint Task Force North working counter-narcotics operations. Saw groups like the Road Wolves turn quiet communities into war zones. And now they're here. Tom sighed. I've got 2 deputies total. Marcus, if they come in force, they will. Marcus interrupted, but they won't expect what's waiting for them. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The conversation halted as the rumble of motorcycles filled the parking lot. Not just 2 this time, 6 bikes pulled in, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun. Hammer led the pack with Snake close behind. The other 4 riders were new faces, each wearing the Road Wolves colors. Inside the diner, the atmosphere shifted. The regular customers tensed, but the truckers Marcus had called in remained notably calm. Big Steve casually adjusted his position, giving himself a clear line to the door. Doc Wilson stretched his movements, deliberate, as he created space around his table. The bikers entered as a group, their boots heavy on the linoleum floor. Hammer's eyes narrowed as he took in the crowd, obviously not expecting so many people this early. Well, look who's still here, Hammer sneered, spotting Marcus's confidence wavered slightly as he noticed Sheriff Cooper, but he pressed on. Brought some friends this time. Thought we should continue our conversation about the new management situation. Marcus turned slowly on his stool, his movements unhurried. Nothing's changed since last night. This isn't your territory, and it's not going to be. One of the new bikers, a hulking man with a shaved head, stepped forward. You don't get to make that call, old man. Stand down, Brick, Hammer warned, studying the room more carefully now. Something about the trucker's calm demeanor had caught his attention. We're just here to talk business. No, Marcus said firmly. You're here to establish a drug distribution point. Same pattern you've used at other stops down south. Intimidation first, then take over the legitimate business. Use it as a front for moving product. Snake's hand drifted toward his jacket, but before he could make a move, Big Steve's voice cut through the tension. I wouldn't, Steve said calmly, not unless you want to find out how many combat veterans are in this room right now. Hammer's eyes darted around, really seeing the other truckers for the first time. He recognized the way they carried themselves, the disciplined stillness in their postures. These weren't ordinary drivers. These were trained fighters trying to look like ordinary drivers. You think bringing in a few other old-timers changes anything? Hammer's voice carried less conviction. Now this is happening whether you like it or not. Marcus stood slowly, his movement drawing all eyes. Let me be very clear. I know your operation. I know your supply lines. I spent 20 years tracking and shutting down organizations like yours. You're not the first to try this, and you won't be the last. But right here, right now, you've got a choice. That right? Hammer's hand twitched near his vest. And what choice is that? Leave, find somewhere else to peddle your drugs. Because if you push this, if you really want to make Crossroads your battleground, you're not just taking on me or these people in here. You're taking on an entire community of veterans who've spent their lives dealing with threats bigger than you. The diner had fallen completely silent. Even the regular customers seemed to hold their breath, watching the standoff unfold. Sheriff Cooper remained seated but alert, his hand casually resting near his holster. Brick took another step forward, but Hammer grabbed his arm. Something in Marcus's words, or maybe in the steady gazes of the truckers around the room, had given him pause. This is your territory, huh? Hammer's voice dripped with sarcasm, but there was uncertainty beneath it. No, Marcus replied, it's everyone's territory. That's what you don't understand. We're not claiming it, we're protecting it. Snake spat on the floor. Big words from an old man, not words. Marcus corrected him. Promise you want to test us? Go ahead. But remember, whatever happens next, you chose it. Hammer studied Marcus for a long moment, then looked around the room. Once more, the odds had shifted dramatically since last night, and he knew it. Finally, he jerked his head toward the door. "Let's go," he ordered his crew. "Plenty of other stops on this highway." As the bikers filed out, Hammer turned back. "This isn't over." "Yes," Marcus said quietly. "It is, you just don't know it yet." The roar of motorcycles filled the air as the road wolves departed inside. The tension slowly blowed out of the room. Beth let out a long breath she'd been holding, while Jenny managed a shaky smile. Sheriff Cooper stood, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "They'll be back with more numbers next time." "I know," Marcus nodded. "That's what I'm counting on. Time to show them what happens when they target the wrong veteran at the wrong truck stop." The morning sun climbed higher as the regular customers began to return to their meals, but something had changed at Crossroads. A line had been drawn, and on one side stood a community united, led by a quiet veteran who decided that some battles were worth fighting all over again. The afternoon sun beat down on Crossroads truck stop as Marcus sat with Sheriff Cooper and a growing group of truckers in the far corner of the diner. Beth had closed off this section, giving them privacy to plan. Big Steve spread out a map of the local highways on the table, marking known road wolves sightings with red dots. "They've hit every major stop from Houston up through Oklahoma City," Steve explained, his thick finger tracing the pattern. "Always the same method: intimidation, then take over, then the drugs start flowing." Doc Wilson leaned forward, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "According to my contacts, they've got at least 30 full members, maybe more prospects. They're not just some random gang, they're organized." Marcus nodded, studying the map. "They use the truck stops as distribution hubs. Truckers on their payroll pick up shipments, move them across state lines. The stops provide cover and legitimate business front, and we're right in the middle of their planned expansion," Sheriff Cooper added, pointing to their location. "Perfect spot to control distribution along 3 major highways." Jenny approached with fresh coffee, her steps hesitant. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you should know." She glanced nervously over her shoulder. "2 guys on bikes have been circling the lot for the past hour. They're not road wolves, no colors, but they're definitely watching the place." Marcus exchanged looks with Cooper. "Scouts," they said simultaneously. "They're studying our patterns." Marcus continued, "trying to figure out our weaknesses when we're most vulnerable." Big Steve cracked his knuckles. "Let's go show them what we think about spies." "No," Marcus said firmly. "Let them watch, let them think they're getting good intelligence." Meanwhile, he turned to Cooper. "Tom, how many of your former deputies would be willing to come back for temporary duty?" Cooper straightened. "Most of them. I'd guess budget cuts forced us to downsize, but they're still loyal." "Why?" "Because we're going to need eyes everywhere, not just here, but along all their likely approach routes." Marcus pointed to several spots on the map. "They'll come in force next time, try to overwhelm us quickly. We need to be ready." A new voice joined the conversation. "Maybe I can help with that." Everyone turned to see Carl Martins, a local mechanic and regular at the truck stop, approaching their table. "I served with the Army Corps of Engineers, got some ideas about how to control access to the lot. If you're interested." Marcus gestured for him to join them. "We're interested in everything right now." As they talked, more people began drifting over. A retired school teacher who'd served in military intelligence, a young waitress whose brother was currently deployed overseas, a local farmer who'd been in the National Guard. Each brought something to the table: information, skills, resources. Beth watched from behind the counter, amazed at how quickly her quiet truck stop had transformed into what looked like a military command center. She caught Marcus' eye and nodded, determination replacing her earlier fear. The afternoon wore on as plans were made and roles assigned. Marcus kept one eye on the window, watching the scouts make their passes. "Let them look," he thought. "Let them think they're seeing everything." Around sunset, Jenny rushed in from taking out trash. Their backhammer and Snake got about 10 bikes with them this time. Marcus stood calmly. "Everybody remember what we discussed: no one acts alone, no one takes unnecessary risks." The bikers roared into the lot, their increased numbers a clear attempt at intimidation. This time, they didn't all come inside. Hammer entered with just Snake and 2 others, leaving the rest to circle the building menacingly on their bikes. "Nice little war council you got going here," Hammer called out, eyeing the gathered group. "Planning something special for us?" Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself between the bikers and the others. "Just having coffee with friends. You should try it sometime." Having friends, Snake snarled, but Hammer held up a hand to stop him. "You know, I've been asking around about you. Marcus Davidson, Force Recon Counter-Narcotics Operations, Distinguished Service Cross recipient, quite a resume. Now if you've learned that much, then you know what happens next." Marcus replied evenly. "What happens is you back off." Hammer's voice hardened. "This isn't the military, and you're not in charge here. This is business." "No," Marcus corrected him. "This is community, something you wouldn't understand." Hammer's eyes narrowed. "Community won't stop what's coming. You've made this personal now. Whatever happens next, remember you chose this." "Funny," Marcus said. "I was about to say the same thing to you." The tension in the room was electric. Both sides knew this was the last conversation before things got serious. Sheriff Cooper moved slightly, making his presence known but maintaining his distance. "Last chance," Hammer offered. Though his tone suggested he knew the answer. "Step aside, let business happen. Nobody needs to get hurt." Marcus didn't move. "You're right, nobody needs to get hurt. That's why you're going to take your people and leave. Find another route for your drugs, another territory to terrorize." "Or what?" Snake challenged. "Or you'll find out exactly what happens when you target the wrong veteran at the wrong truck stop." Hammer studied Marcus for a long moment, then turned to leave. At the door he paused. "War. It is then. Hope you're ready for what that means." After they roared away, Cooper approached Marcus. "They'll hit us hard next time. No more warnings, no more talks." Marcus nodded. "Good, let them come in force. The bigger the show they make, the more evidence we'll have when we take them down." The group returned to their planning, but now there was a new urgency to their preparations. The road wolves had shown their hand. Next time wouldn't be about intimidation, it would be about conquest. As night fell, Marcus watched more community members arrive, each bringing something to contribute to the defense of their truck stop. The road wolves thought they were dealing with just one veteran, but they were about to learn a hard lesson about the strength of a community united against a common threat. "You really think we can stop them?" Jenny asked quietly as she cleared away coffee cups. Marcus smiled slightly. "Stop them? No, we're going to do much more than that. We're going to end them." The parking lot lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the pavement. Somewhere out there, the road wolves were preparing for war. But here at Crossroads, a different kind of army was forming, one built on brotherhood, community, and the unshakable determination of those who had sworn to protect others. The battle for Crossroads truck stop was about to begin, and Marcus Davidson was making sure they'd be ready when it did. Night had fallen at Crossroads truck stop, but the parking lot blazed with light. Marcus stood at the window watching Carl Martins and his crew finishing the installation of additional floodlights. They'd spent the day making subtle but significant changes to the lot's layout: concrete barriers positioned to control access, security cameras mounted at key points, clear lines of sight established. "Your old counter-narcotics experience showing through." Sheriff Cooper observed, joining Marcus at the window, creating a controlled approach. Marcus nodded. "Take away their ability to surround us, force them to come in where we want them to." The radio at Cooper's hip crackled. "Sheriff, this is Deputy Wilson. Got about 20 bikes gathering at the old mill 5 mi south. Looks like they're gearing up for something." "Copy that," Cooper responded. "Keep your distance, maintain observation." Inside the diner, the atmosphere was tense but controlled. Big Steve and Doc Wilson had positioned themselves near the entrance, while other veteran truckers were scattered strategically throughout the space. Beth had sent most of her regular staff home, keeping only those who insisted on staying to help. "You sure about this, Beth?" asked Marcus, her voice low. "We could just call in the state police, shut the place down for a few days. That's what they want," Marcus replied. "Force you to close, then move in when you're vulnerable." "No. We face them here now on our terms." The distant rumble of motorcycles grew steadily louder. Marcus checked his watch. "Just past midnight, right on schedule," he muttered. Jenny, who had refused to leave despite Marcus' protests, moved closer to Beth behind the counter. "How many do you think there are?" Before Marcus could answer, the sound of engines filled the air as bikes began pouring into the lot. They came in waves, first a group of 10, then another, then more, until nearly 30 motorcycles circled the building, their riders revving engines in an intimidating display. Hammer led the main group through the front door, With Snake and Brick flanking him, the other road wolves filed in. Behind them, filling the diner with the smell of leather and exhaust, some carried chains, others had bats poorly concealed under their vests. Quite a welcoming committee, Hammer called out, surveying the room. But it won't make any difference. Marcus stepped forward, his calm presence a stark contrast to the bikers' aggressive energy. Last chance to walk away, Hammer laughed. The sound echoed by his crew. Walk away, look around, old man, you're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. This stop is ours now. Numbers don't win fights, Marcus replied evenly. You should know that. No, Snake sneered, pulling out a chain. Let's test that theory. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Snake swung the chain, but Marcus was already moving. Years of combat training took over as he stepped inside Snake's reach, redirecting the chain's momentum while simultaneously sweeping the biker's legs. Snake hit the ground hard, the chain clattering away. The room erupted into chaos. Brick charged forward, only to be met by Big Steve's massive fist. Doc Wilson and two other truckers engaged the nearest bikers, their movements coordinated and precise. These weren't random brawlers, these were trained fighters working together. Hammer pulled a knife, but before he could use it, Sheriff Cooper's voice cut through the mayhem. I wouldn't. The sheriff stood calmly, his weapon drawn. Unless you want to add assault with a deadly weapon to your charges. More bikers tried to push forward, but found themselves facing an organized defense. The veterans Marcus had gathered moved with military precision, controlling space and protecting the civilians. Even Jenny and Beth had roles to play, staying safely behind the counter while recording everything on their phones. Outside, sirens wailed as Cooper's deputies approached, backed by state police who'd been stationed nearby. The road wolves found themselves caught in a carefully staged trap, their superior numbers meaningless in the confined space. You planned this, Hammer spat, realizing too late what Marcus had done. Used us. Marcus nodded slightly. Like I said, numbers don't win fights, strategied does. The fight was over almost as quickly as it had begun. Several bikers were down, others were backing away, and the sound of approaching sirens was getting louder. Hammer looked around wildly, seeing his advantage evaporating. This isn't over, he snarled, backing toward the door. Actually, his Cooper said, we've got squad cars blocking both ends of the highway. Nobody's leaving until we sort this out. Hammer's face twisted with rage. You think this stops anything? We got people you don't even know about, operations you can't touch. Marcus smiled slightly. Thank you for confirming that. State police will be very interested in that admission. The realization of what had happened finally dawned on Hammer's face. This hadn't just been about defending the truck stop, it was a staged operation to get the road wolves to incriminate themselves, to gather evidence of their larger criminal enterprise. You son of a! Hammer lunged at Marcus, but never completed his move. Marcus sidestepped, used Hammer's momentum against him, and had him face down on the floor in seconds, arm locked behind his back. Like I said, Marcus spoke quietly, holding Hammer down. You picked the wrong veteran to mess with. State police flooded into the diner, quickly taking control of the situation. The road wolves, their bravado shattered, were disarmed, and cuffed. Evidence was collected, statements taken, and the first phase of Marcus' plan was complete. This was never about just defending the truck stop, was it? Cooper asked as they watched the bikers being loaded into police vehicles. Marcus shook his head. Had to draw them out, get them to show their hand. Now we've got probable cause for a larger investigation into their whole operation. Beth approached, surveying the minimal damage to her diner. So it's over? No, Marcus replied, watching the last of the road wolves being taken away. This was just the beginning. Now we go after their entire organization, but they won't be bothering Crossroads again. The parking lot gradually cleared, the roar of motorcycles replaced by the quiet hum of the truck stop's normal operation. Jenny began cleaning up the minor mess from the scuffle, while Big Steve and the others helped reset the dining room. Marcus returned to his usual spot at the counter, accepting a fresh cup of coffee from Beth. The night's events had been carefully orchestrated, a tactical operation disguised as a simple defense of territory. The road wolves had expected to find an old veteran trying to play hero. Instead, they'd run head first into a carefully laid trap sprung by a man who'd spent his life taking down bigger and more dangerous organizations. You knew they'd come in Force Cooper said joining Marcus at the counter knew they'd try to overwhelm us with numbers. Marcus nodded. People like that are predictable. They only know one way to solve problems with force makes them easy to manipulate if you understand their psychology. The first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. Crossroads had survived its first major battle, but everyone knew the war was far from over. Somewhere out there, the rest of the Road Wolves organization was about to learn that their attempt to take over a simple truck stop had led them into a fight they couldn't win. Morning light streamed through the windows of Sheriff Cooper's office as Marcus studied the evidence board. They assembled photos of arrested Road Wolves members covered one section, while a map showing suspected drug routes dominated. Another Deputy Wilson was updating the board with information from the night's arrests. Hammer's not talking, Cooper said, entering with 2 cups of coffee, but Snake's another story. Amazing what a few hours in lockup will do to a man. Loyalty. Marcus accepted the coffee. What's he giving us? Names, dates, locations. Seems the Road Wolves are just the muscle for a larger operation. They're working with a Mexican cartel using truck stops as distribution points across 5 states, just like I thought. Marcus nodded. The gang provides local control. The cartel provides product and protection. Classic structure I saw dozens of times in force. Recon. Deputy Wilson pinned another photo to the board. Snake mentioned a name, Diego Ramirez, as he's the cartel connection. Marcus straightened his expression, hardening. Ramirez, you're sure? Yeah, why, you know him. Last operation I ran before retiring, Marcus explained. We nearly caught him moving product across the border, but he slipped away. Lost 2 good men in that firefight. The office door opened as Beth walked in carrying a box of donuts. Thought you boys could use breakfast. She set the box down, then moved to study the evidence board. So these Road Wolves, they're bigger than we thought. Much bigger. Cooper confirmed. Your truck stop was just the latest target in a major expansion plan. They've been systematically taking over transportation hubs, building a distribution network. Marcus's phone buzzed. He checked the message, then looked up. Grimly, just heard from my contact in Texas. Road Wolves leadership is calling an emergency meeting. Our little operation last night got their attention. Good, Cooper said. Maybe they'll back off. No, Marcus shook his head. They can't afford to. We've disrupted their supply line, embarrassed them publicly. They'll hit back hard, as if confirming his words. Jenny burst into the office, her face pale. You need to see this. They followed her outside across the street from the sheriff's office. A Road Wolves prospect was spray painting a message on the wall. War is coming before anyone could move. 3 bikes roared past their riders, throwing something. Glass shattered as Molotov cocktails exploded against the pavements, sending flames spreading across the street. Everyone back, Marcus shouted, pulling Jenny to safety as Cooper called for fire response. The bikes disappeared around the corner, leaving chaos in their wake as emergency crews arrived to handle the fire. Marcus studied the graffiti message. The paint was still wet, dripping down the wall like blood. They're escalating, Cooper observed, joining him. Making it personal. It already was personal, Marcus replied. Now they're just showing their hand. Back at Crossroads, Big Steve and the other veterans had transformed the truck stop into a fortress. Security cameras monitored every approach, and concrete barriers controlled access to the lot. Regular customers still came and went, but everyone was watched, evaluated. Got movement on the South Road. Doc Wilson reported through the radio. He was set up in an observation post with a clear view of approaching traffic. 3 bikes just watching for now. Marcus acknowledged the report, then turned to Cooper. They're probing, looking for weaknesses. The attack downtown was just to show they can hit us anywhere. I can request state police support, Cooper offered. Not yet. Let them think they've got us rattled. Meanwhile, Marcus pulled out his phone, showing Cooper a series of messages. My old contacts are coming through, getting intel on Road Wolves operations across the region. Beth, who had been listening nearby, approached. What did they want? Really want control, Marcus explained. The cartel needs reliable distribution routes. The Road Wolves provide that by controlling key transport hubs. But it's not just about drugs, it's about power. They can't let a small truck stop successfully resist them. Word would spread, others might get ideas. The radio crackled again. More Bikes approaching from the east. Looks like they're photographing the lot. Marcus moved to the window, watching the bikers make slow passes. Let them look, they won't see what matters. Throughout the day, more reports came in. Road Wolves members were gathering in small groups throughout the region, local businesses reported. Intimidation attempts. The gang was flexing its muscles, trying to show strength after the previous night's defeat. By evening, the tension was palpable. Jenny jumped at every motorcycle sound, while Beth kept checking the security cameras. Even the veteran truckers seemed on edge, knowing that somewhere out there the Road Wolves were planning their revenge. Marcus sat at his usual spot, apparently relaxed, but missing nothing. His phone buzzed with another message, this one from an old military contact. The contents made him smile grimly. "What is it?" Cooper asked, noticing Marcus's expression. "Remember how Snake mentioned Diego Ramirez? Just got confirmation he's personally coming up from Mexico to handle this situation. That's bad, right?" "Actually," Marcus said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "it's exactly what we want. The Road Wolves are the local muscle, but Ramirez is the real target. If we can catch him here, we can take down the entire operation." Cooper finished. Marcus nodded. The gang's ego won't let them back down, and Ramirez can't afford to lose this territory. They'll come at us with everything they have, and that's good. That's perfect, because this time we'll be ready for all of them. As night fell over Crossroads, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. More bikes were spotted circling the area, their riders more aggressive. Now everyone knew that the Road Wolves' response was coming, and it would be violent. But looking around the truck stop, Marcus saw not fear but determination. The community had come together, found its strength. What the Road Wolves and their cartel backers didn't understand was that they weren't just fighting one veteran. They were fighting an entire community that had decided to take a stand. War is coming, Marcus said quietly, looking at the graffiti message visible from the window, but they have no idea what kind of war they've started. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Crossroads as Marcus met with a group of trusted allies in the back office. The room had been transformed into an impromptu command center with maps and surveillance photos covering every wall. Big Steve stood guard outside while Doc Wilson helped organize the latest intelligence. "Ramirez is definitely on the move," Marcus explained, pointing to a series of photos. "Our contacts spotted him crossing the border yesterday. He's traveling with a small security detail, trying to stay under the radar." Sheriff Cooper leaned forward, studying the images. "How do you get these so quickly?" "Old friends from Joint Task Force North. They've been watching Ramirez for years, waiting for him to make a mistake." Marcus tapped one photo showing Ramirez meeting with Road Wolves leaders. "This is his mistake." Jenny knocked and entered with fresh coffee, her eyes widening at the wall of evidence. "Is that him, the cartel H guy?" Marcus nodded. "Diego Ramirez. He started as a small-time enforcer, worked his way up. Now he controls drug distribution across 3 states. The Road Wolves are just his latest attempt to expand territory, and he's coming here." Jenny's voice trembled slightly. "He has to." Cooper interjected. "We've disrupted his operation, embarrassed his people in his world that demands a personal response." The radio crackled with Big Steve's voice. "Heads up, got 2 SUVs with Texas plates doing slow passes of the lot. Don't recognize the drivers." Marcus moved to the window, watching the black vehicles cruise past. Advan team, they're scouting for Ramirez, making sure it's safe for him to come in. Beth entered the office, her face tight with concern. "Just got a call from Mike at the Highway 40 truck stop. Road Wolves showed up this morning, threatened to burn the place down if he didn't close. They're isolating us," Marcus explained, trying to cut off support from other stops in the area. "Classic cartel tactic." Cooper's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked up grimly. "State Police just found one of my deputies beaten up behind the gas station. Left him with a message, either we back off or more people get hurt." Marcus's expression hardened. "They're escalating, trying to force us to make a mistake." He turned to the group. "This is where it gets dangerous. They'll keep pushing, keep hurting people until we either give in or react emotionally. So what do we do?" Jenny asked. "We stick to the plan, let them think they're in control." Meanwhile, Marcus pulled out his phone, showing them a series of text messages. "My contacts have been tracking Road Wolves' movement. They're gathering forces, bringing in members from other chapters, But that's not the important part. He pointed to a particular message. Ramirez isn't just coming to deal with us, he's bringing a major shipment with him, wants to demonstrate that nothing can stop his operation. Cooper straightened. You're sure about this? Positive. He's arrogant, believes his own legend, the idea that a small truck stop could resist him. He needs to prove his power. Doc Wilson, who had been quietly studying the evidence wall, spoke up. If he's bringing product with him, that means federal jurisdiction. Marcus finished. DEA, FBI, all of it, but we have to catch him in the A seat. If he just shows up to intimidate us, we got nothing. The radio crackled again. More bikes coming in from the south. Looks like they're setting up observation posts. Marcus nodded. They'll watch us for a while, try to learn our patterns. Let them. Everything they see is what we want them to see. Beth crossed her arms. What about my customers, my staff? I can't put them at risk. Already handled, Marcus assured her. When this goes down, legitimate customers will be cleared out. We're coordinating with state police for an evacuation order. Make it look like we're backing down. And then Jenny asked, and then we spring the trap. But first, Marcus turned to Cooper. We need to send a message of our own. Let them know that hurting your deputy was a mistake. Cooper's eyes narrowed. What kind of message? The kind that makes them angry, makes them sloppy. Ramirez is too smart, too controlled. We need the road wolves to push him into action before he's ready. As they discussed strategy, the SUVs made another pass of the truck stop. Inside one, a man spoke quietly into a phone, reporting their observations to someone higher up the chain. They didn't realize that every move they made was being photographed, documented, added to the growing pile of evidence. Night began to fall, and with it came more motorcycle activity around Crossroads. The road wolves were becoming bolder, their presence more obvious. They wanted everyone to feel the pressure, to understand that resistance was futile. But in the back office, Marcus and his allies continued planning. The walls filled with more photos, more connections. The picture of Ramirez's operation grew clearer with each passing hour. Remember, Marcus told the group as they prepared to implement the next phase of their plan. Everything that happens in the next few days has to look natural. They need to believe they're in control, that their intimidation is working. And if something goes wrong, Jenny asked. Marcus's expression was grim. Then we shift to contingency plans. But nothing goes wrong because we're not just fighting for a truck stop anymore. We're fighting for every community these people have terrorized. As the meeting broke up, Marcus remained in the office, studying the photos of Ramirez 20 years ago. He nearly caught him at the border. Now fate had given him another chance, but this time he had something better than military backing. He had a community united against a common enemy. The radio crackled one more time. More bikes coming in. Looks like they're getting ready for something big. Good, Marcus said quietly. So, are we? The first attack came just before midnight. A dozen road wolves roared into the nearly empty parking lot of Crossroads, their bikes moving in practiced formation. Security cameras tracked their approach as Marcus and his team watched from inside. Here we go, Marcus said quietly, noting how the bikers positioned themselves strategically around the building. First wave. Hammer wasn't among them. He was still in custody, but Snake had made bail and led the group. They dismounted as one, pulling out chains, bats, and other weapons. Snake approached the main entrance, his face twisted in a sneer. Come on out, old man, time to finish what we started. Inside, Beth clutched her baseball bat while Jenny stayed behind the counterphone, recording everything. Big Steve and Doc Wilson flanked the entrance while other veteran truckers maintained defensive positions throughout the diner. Marcus stood calmly in the center of the room. Remember, he told everyone, let them make the first move. Everything has to be clearly self. The fence. The sound of breaking glass shattered the tension as bricks came through the windows. Snake's voice carried over the chaos. This is what happens when you mess with the road wolves. More bikers appeared from the darkness, bringing the total to around 20. They began systematically attacking the building, breaking windows and spray painting threats on the walls. Hold position, Marcus ordered as some of the truckers moved to respond. Not yet. Sheriff Cooper's voice crackled over the radio. In position. State police are 2 minutes out. You sure about this? Marcus positive. Let them commit fully to the attack. Snake, growing frustrated by the lack of response, kicked in the front door. What's wrong, hero? Not so tough without your cop friends around. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Last warning. Leave now, or this ends badly for all of you." Several bikers rushed forward, led by Snake. They made it 3 steps into the diner before the trap was sprung. Lights suddenly blazed from concealed positions, temporarily blinding the attackers. The veteran truckers moved with military precision, neutralizing threats before they could react. Big Steve caught Snake with a perfect tackle, driving him into the floor. Doc Wilson and 2 others handled his immediate backup. The remaining bikers found themselves facing an organized defense they hadn't expected. Outside, police sirens wailed as state troopers moved in, blocking escape routes that had been carefully pre-planned. The road wolves, caught between the defenders inside and law enforcement outside, quickly discovered they'd walked into an elaborate trap. "Drop your weapons," Cooper's voice boomed through a megaphone. "The building is surrounded." Some bikers tried to run, only to find their bikes mysteriously disabled. Carl Martinez's contribution to the plan. Others surrendered immediately, realizing they were hopelessly outmatched. Snake, pinned under Big Steve's knee, spat blood and curses. "You don't know what you've started. When Ramirez gets here, that's exactly what we wanted to hear," Marcus said, holding up a phone that had been recording everything. A clear connection between the road wolves and Ramirez, caught on multiple devices, admissible in court. The fight was over in minutes, ending with most of the road wolves in custody. Property damage was significant but controlled, exactly as Marcus had planned. "You set this up," Snake realized as state troopers cuffed him. "Used us to get evidence. You made it easy," Marcus replied. "People like you always react the same way, with force and threats." Predictable. As the arrested bikers were loaded into transport vehicles, Cooper joined Marcus inside. "That's twice we've caught them. They'll be even more desperate now." "Good," Marcus nodded, "because this was just the warm-up. The real target is still coming." Beth surveyed the damage to her diner. "At least nobody was seriously hurt." "They'll be back," Jenny said quietly, still recording with her phone. "With more people, count on it," Marcus agreed. "But now we've got solid evidence linking them to Ramirez that changes everything." The radio crackled with an urgent message from one of their lookouts. "Multiple vehicles approaching from the south, high-end SUVs with armed escorts." Not. Marcus moved to the window, watching the approaching convoy. "Right on schedule. Ramirez wants to see the situation for himself." 4 black SUVs rolled past slowly, their windows tinted, but not enough to hide the occupants completely. In the second vehicle, a man in an expensive suit was just visible, studying the scene. "That's him," Marcus said quietly. "Diego Ramirez himself, coming to inspect his damaged operation." The convoy didn't stop, but the message was clear. The real battle was about to begin. Ramirez wasn't a common criminal like the road wolves. He was calculating, patient, and completely ruthless. "What now?" Cooper asked as the SUVs disappeared into the night. "Now we wait. He'll want to reestablish control, quickly prove that no one can resist his organization when he makes his move." Marcus smiled grimly. "We'll be ready." Inside the diner, the cleanup began. Windows were boarded up, glass swept away, evidence carefully preserved, but there was a new tension in the air. Everyone knew that Ramirez's appearance meant the conflict was escalating beyond simple gang violence. "You've dealt with him before," Beth said to Marcus and the Marines. "What can we expect? He'll be subtle at first, offer money, try to buy us off. When that fails, he'll threaten families, try to divide us. Only then will he resort to violence. But when he does, it'll be overwhelming." Jenny shuddered. "Can we really stand up to someone like that?" Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We already are. Everything that's happened, the fights, the arrests, the property damage, it's all building case not just against the road wolves, but against Ramirez's entire operation." The night grew quiet again, but no one relaxed. More bikes could be heard in the distance, circling, watching. The road wolves weren't finished, and now they had cartel backing to worry about. "Get some rest," Marcus told the group. "Tomorrow, we show them what happens when they bring a cartel war to our doorstep." Dawn broke over Crossroads truck stop, revealing the full extent of last night's damage. Boarded windows and spray-painted threats stood as stark reminders of the roadwolf attack, but inside, Marcus was focused on a different threat. He sat with Sheriff Cooper and Two DEA agents who'd arrived early that morning reviewing intelligence on Ramirez's operation, our sources confirm. He's setting up a major distribution hub. Agent Sarah Torres explained, spreading photos across the table. The road wolves were just phase 1, intimidate local businesses, establish control of transport routes. Phase 2 is the actual drug pipeline. Marcus studied a surveillance photo showing Ramirez meeting with other cartel leaders. He's expanding aggressively. This isn't just about one truck stop anymore. No, Agent Mike Phillips agreed, pointing to a map marked with suspicious activity. He's building a network. Every truck stop, every rest area from Texas to Kansas is a potential distribution point. Conservative estimate puts the operation's value at $500 million annually. Cooper whistled low. No wonder he came personally to handle this situation. It's not just about money, Marcus interjected. Ramirez has a reputation to maintain. If word gets out that a small truck stop successfully resisted him, others might try the same. Torres finished. We can't let that happen. This might be our best chance to catch him. The meeting was interrupted by Big Steve's urgent entry. Got movement on the South Road. 3 black SUVs, same ones as last night. Everyone moved to the window, watching the vehicle approach. This time, they didn't just drive past. The convoy pulled into the lot, parking in a defensive formation. Men in expensive suits emerged, their bulges under their jackets clearly indicating weapons. Here we go, Marcus said quietly. Remember, let them make the first move. Ramirez stepped out last, his designer suit and in confident stride, marking him as the leader. He was shorter than Marcus expected, but carried himself with the authority of someone used to absolute power. The cartel leader entered Crossroads, flanked by 4 guards. He surveyed the damage from last night's attack, then focused on Marcus with a practiced smile. Mr. Davidson, Ramirez said smoothly, I believe we have some business to discuss. Marcus stood calmly, positioning himself between Ramirez and the others. Nothing to discuss. This isn't your territory. Ramirez's smile didn't waver. Everything is my territory, Mr. Davidson. The only question is whether the transition will be profitable for everyone. Or he gestured to the damaged windows. Unpleasant. The only transition happening here is you going to prison, Cooper stated firmly. One of Ramirez's guards reached inside his jacket.